Yes, sir. Dang, that's a good song. This is Theology in the Dirt, where we try to practice our theology in the public square of our homes, our city, and our world. You get sermon notes, links to the rest of our podcasts, of which this is 142 at theologyindirt.com. My name is Mitchell Jolly.
And I'm Chris Hayes.
Yo, what's good, man?
Fall break is good. Enjoying some time with Brittany and Addison this week. They're home all week from school. And then, of course, super excited about our leadership retreat this weekend. Some people kind of dread those kinds of things, but that's like my jam. Give me some whiteboards and some team building activities. And
you're an events guy, too, though. You're good at pulling off events.
Which is something I wouldn't have thought of a long time ago, but it's become just what I've done for a long time now. And
those things are super stressful for some of us, not because of like the content, but it's like the idea of executing them. It's not like you can't. It's just like I'm not an events guy,
right?
Like it makes me like my skin crawl.
Well, when you reach that like elite level of like speakership and you just show up and everything's done, it's nice. Celebrityism,
Piper, Dever. Some of that stuff, man. We probably need. So what's good? Like this, it's the fall break.
All of it's good, yeah. Fall break,
ministry director retreat,
and then also go Braves and Dogs.
Yeah, see, for me, man, the Braves beat the Mets. Like, you guys, baseball. I appreciate baseball. Football is my favorite, but the Braves are one game out behind the Mets now. That's a big deal. Then half game out the Diamondbacks, and Diamondbacks are faltering. Braves got two more with the Mets with a hurricane coming through, so that's going to be interesting.
It's going to be really interesting. Yeah.
But it's absolutely necessary to pull it off. Yeah. So, yeah, the Diamondbacks are a half game up on the Braves for the last wild card spot in the National League. And so the Braves had an injury-riddled year. But, man, some of the guys are getting it together here toward the end of the year, and you never know what kind of run you can make. So that's good. College football on Saturday, Georgia, Alabama. Lots of good stuff happening. Real fired up about that. So that's what's good. But even better, what's good is we got Mark and Lauren Estes here, and it's time to shake and bake.
Shake and bake. Shake and then bake. Shake and bake. Shake and bake. It's shake and bake time. Shake and bake, buddy. Shake it before you bake it.
Now, Mark, you know where that comes from. I know. Yeah. Lauren, do you know?
Absolutely no idea.
I'm not gonna. I doubt you would enjoy watching that movie at all. Nope. But it's culturally iconic among dudes. Talladega Nights, Battle of Ricky Bobby. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful movie. Piece of cinematic masterpiece. It's
not even Anchorman, none of that.
I don't know, Mark. It's pretty good stuff. Well, guys, thank you for taking time to come in today. It's a pleasure to have you guys in here with us. You're in this building quite a bit anyway, and so this is your first time, I guess, in the studio for Theology in the Dirt.
Yeah, so, welcome in. So if you've been watching us and wondering, there's two random people sitting in there. They are Mark and Lauren Estes. We've got that correct. You guys are members of TRC and leaders. Mark oversees our Radical Life group leaders, and you guys both lead a Radical Life group, one I'm extremely grateful to be a part of. But with that said, tell our listeners just a little bit about yourselves and your family.
Okay. So obviously we are married. We've been married for almost 19 years. We've got three beautiful daughters. Two of them are from adoption, and one of them is a bio. Which our oldest is adopted, our youngest
bio is biological, by the way. If anybody's like, what, not created elsewhere, but like biological.
She kind of is a little clone of her mama.
True.
So we've got our oldest, who is almost 15. She was adopted at birth 15 years ago, and then our middle is Chandler, and she is 13. She just turned 13, and then our youngest and newest addition. As of a little over a month ago, is Charlie, and we just adopted her from DFAX.
Awesome.
Yeah. And she'll be, 3 in December?
December.
She will be 3 in December.
Wow. So kind of got in under that 3-year mark.
Right. Yeah. So we've been living in Rome for a
little over 5 years.
A little over 5 years. So, so it's kind of become our home. Our kids are putting some roots down and really just making this their home. So
awesome. Sure. Well, what you said you've been in Rome for about 5 years. What kind of led you to Rome, and then And part of that, how did you end up at because you've been at Three Rivers 3 or 4 years, not all 5, right?
Almost all.
Almost all 5. Okay, so kind of what led you to Rome and what led you to Three Rivers?
Yeah, so we moved to Rome 5 years ago. We are originally from Georgia, both of us. Lauren grew up in Gwinnett, and I grew up in Paulding. And we met through mutual friends. And but 2 years into marriage, we were called to be church planters in Charleston, South Carolina. So that's what took us away from Georgia for the first time. And then 5 years there, successful church plant. God called us into house parenting, which is a whole nother ballgame in a world. So let me just put it this way. I started in construction and construction sales, and then went from church planting to house parenting. Things that
pretty natural transition.
Yeah. I mean, who go, yeah, that's what I was studying, construction to be a house parent.
Yeah, right.
So
it's not all that dissimilar.
Right, yeah.
With 10 girls.
A lot of building
10 girls.
Yeah.
included in that. So we went there and we were house parents in Tennessee, in East Tennessee for 4 years, and then we were a brief stint in Hershey, Pennsylvania, as well as being house parents in another organization. And but God placed it on our hearts to be, since we were house parents, we just realized some of our kids that would age out of group care and foster care and stuff like that, where there's not a lot of support or services for them. So our heart was drawn there, and God led us to really have a heart for that and try to figure that out of how we can kind of stand in that gap. And then that's kind of where WindShape fell in our laps while we were in Pennsylvania. And out of the blue, we got called to that they were interested in creating and developing a independent living program for kids at risk youth or young adults. And that's kind of how we got back to Rome or back to Georgia in the first place, and developed that over the past 5 years. That's what we were here to do, and that's what we've been doing since we've been here.
Awesome. And then you guys ended up at Three Rivers just was that through some friends? You want to talk about that, Lauren? How'd you end up at church?
Yeah, there's a ton of churches around the area to visit. So we visited some, and there were some great people we met in great churches, and we just would pray about it, and really all four of us, we were just praying the Lord would show all 4 of us where we needed to be. And so we'd heard about Three Rivers, and we just hadn't visited yet, but the more we shared with people what we were praying for, several people said, have you tried Three Rivers? So
let me kind of butt in too. We were told not to go to Three Rivers because the pastor there
sounds about right.
Highly opinionated.
Yeah, very true. Very true. That guy's an absolute mess. He's a mess.
Yeah, so we took the risk anyway and went to Three Rivers, and we never left. The first time we went, I was like, that was strange. That was a little weird. And so Mark was like, let's just go back again. I was like, are you sure you want to go back? And
That's
so
awesome.
we went back. And actually the thing that really stuck out from the very first time we went was the way people treated each other. It was different. And so it was just you could tell the community, people weren't teaching us about community as far as telling us. We were watching it happen, even in the service, and people coming up to us. And we were quickly invited to radical life groups. And so we never left after that Sunday.
That's cool.
And we've been here, so almost November will be 5 years.
Wow. I love that there's a consistency. People's like, it's weird. It's really weird. And it's like, it is weird. It's different, right?
It is, yeah.
And it's like, I don't think there's this setting out to be weird or different. It just sort of is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all cults are, eventually. So, I mean, since that's what we are, right?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But it's the weirdness in a good way, though. At least because people used to ask me that, like, what's Three Rivers like? And Brittany and I've been there for over 20 years, and so it was like, well, it's different. It's hard to explain, but the Lord's there, and the people are good, and they seem to be doing, or at least they're striving to try to do things right. And that's part of what I think makes it different. It shouldn't be different. What we do, I don't think should be weird. I think that's more of and that's not to say other churches are wrong. That's not my point, but just trying to do things biblically, not to bring in other people just to fill seats, but to try to be obedient to what we've been called to do, and succeed at that some and fail at that some. And
yeah.
But thankfully it worked out for y'all, and you got here. So we're going to kind of dive into our topic today. Really why we wanted to have you guys on, just to talk about this difficult topic of foster care and adoption. I think there's times where it's painted as this beautiful thing, and it is, and there's times where it's only talked about in a negative light or a hardship, and it is. But I think there's probably a lot of both, and I think you guys have experienced probably every end and middle of that spectrum. And so just want to really first off tell us a little about what led you into wanting to foster or adopt and kind of what got you started.
Yeah, so when we moved here, well, our daughters, because we've been house parents and Allie was adopted, and so our daughters were very like, can we foster? Can we foster? Because they'd heard about that, right? And so they were kind of in that world a little bit. So that was very normal to them to share their parents.
Right.
And so we moved here, and the home the Lord put us in at the time was a very large home. And so literally the day we moved in, our oldest looked at us. She was 9, and she was like, okay, can we foster now? Because we have a big home and we need to use it for that. And so I was like, well, let's like get our stuff in first. Right. Let's just talk about that. So very quickly, our 9-year-old, who's now almost 15, was adamant. And so I told her, I was like, well, then every night we would pray. And I was like, you need to pray that the Lord will bring everybody to the same conclusion. And so very quickly, I was on board. Our youngest was on board, Chandler. Daddy was not on board. And a big part of it, and he would share this, but is he was like, listen, we work with kids who've aged out of foster care. We've adopted. We are taking care of the orphans. Like, he's like, we're there.
We've done our part.
Like, right. I mean, kind of. And he was like, I don't mean that bad. He was like, we can't do anything else. It's like our life is full. And I was like, I get it. And so we all, and that's the thing I told our daughters, I'm like, the Lord's not going to call the 3 of us and not Daddy, right? Daddy leads our family. And so we all together, and Mark was like, hey, I'm open if the Lord wants us to do this, but he's going to show me. And so we all just started praying. And I told the girls, I was like, it may not happen, right? We don't want to do something the Lord doesn't want us to do. So actually, Mark's like the least, if something is stereotypical or like the cool thing, Mark's like kind of anti a little bit. And so actually, I don't even know if you know the story, but it was Stand Sunday that November. And so it's kind of like that is the foster care Sunday, right? Which is really cool. We love it. But it's kind of like everybody does foster care that day. And so we actually were meeting in our home that day with the Radical Life group that we had at the time. So we were watching. After we finished, we all talk about, and Mitch shared about foster care and, all the details of your story and what's the Lord's heart for that. And so out of nowhere, as we're all sitting around talking, I look over at my husband, who is not an emotional human being, and he's sobbing, like hysterically sobbing. And I just was looking at him and I was like, I feel like something's going to happen, right? So he just starts sharing, and he just realized, and the one thing that stuck out, that will always stick out for our family that you shared that day was, as believers, why are we allowing these children to go into other people's homes and because they're welcomed into other people's homes as foster kids, right, in the community. He's like, as believers, why are we not, like, why would we allow them to go in these other homes when we've got Jesus to share with them in our home? Yeah. And that was the thing. Like, that was what the Lord used that day to really get Mark's heart. And we hadn't talked about it in a while, actually. And so, in the middle, he literally said it right there. He was like, this is what we have to do. Like, with our group sitting there. And so I'm like, oh, okay, right? So that was the beginning of how it happened, of how we all jumped on board.
That's such a cool story, kind of how when your child is driving something that's selfless, whether they fully understand it or not. I think that's both encouraging and challenging as a parent, because you don't want to diminish that drive in them, but you also have to set some boundaries of reality and, like you said, make it a family choice. So, like, with that said, and I know I've gotten to know your girls, love your girls, and love their just passion for other people. How has that played out now that you've been through that process and you've got 3 different stories, 3 different scenarios, 3 different girls? How has that worked with interactions with them and both their involvement in fostering, but also just everyday family dynamics?
I don't know. I have to think about that question because I think it does differ from girl to girl and from each individual of our family. But I think our girls grew up in group care, so that's a whole nother ball game of like what they were used to. So we had a home full of I think it was like 16 people in one home, and that's just that was life to them. That was what they were used to. So when we did move to Rome, it was so empty. It was just the four of us, and they're, and the big house, and, kind of felt so empty just because there was only four. So they didn't really know what to do with that. Like I said, I think it was just so normal to them. It felt comfortable to have people that aren't our family in our home.
Right.
And we've done community and small groups for a long time too. So that was a lot of part of it. So our home's always kind of been open and people filled. So that was kind of a neat little transition, what God has done through just that lifestyle, I guess, of making that comfortable or making that normal for our girls. But yeah, I think Allie, our oldest, she really just had this desire to foster, and she's adopted, so she has that love for, a sense of family like that. A lot of people don't have that sense of family of means an adoption and even know what that means. And really, even her cousins at home, like, still wrestle, even though she's been their cousin all their life and all her life. It's still that weird dynamic of like, do we say the word adoption? And it's like, around that's what Allie's totally aware of her story and she loves it. So I think just that love of her story and the love of the understanding of like what it feels like to actually be adopted, and Christ calls us that, or the Bible teaches us that we are adopted.
Right. Yeah.
But we kind of don't really fully understand what it means to be adopted sometimes because we don't fully engage in the adoption. Like she's fully engaged in it. Like she understands it. Like she embraces it. Like there's no shame in it.
Right.
And it's almost like she has this opposite reaction a little bit of, hey, you're not adopted? I'm sorry. It's like this whole idea of like, you're bio, you were birthed from your bio mom. Man,
that's funny.
They're stuck with you.
Yeah, they chose me.
That's funny. And what you guys were doing too is a little bit distinct in that dealing with kids who are aging out. You had a unique setup where they weren't necessarily always inside the main house. And so that was a little bit of a distinction they felt too, right? It's a little bit of a sense of separation, although there isn't, but there is. And that's a unique setup you guys had.
Yeah. And I think they're learning what community looks like too. Not just in family and you're a part of our home or our house. Like our house is utilized for a welcoming, hospitable place to come where we're pouring into people.
Right.
And there's a lot of older brothers and sisters because a lot of the kids that were in our home who were adolescents at the time and minors are now adults and, kind of doing their own, but they're their sisters.
Right.
And they're 25, years old and stuff like that. So, still consider them though as part of the family. We've got a young lady who still comes for Christmas and stuff like that, who's about to graduate college, and it's just, but that's not weird.
Sure.
Or it's just so familiar to our girls. And then Chandler, on the other hand, is the same way in a lot of ways. Obviously, she's our bio kid, and but they're sisters. That's how they know each other. And the kids that run our home feel like family and sisters. They also just understand ministry in that too. They know they're like the girls we have in our home or the kids that have aged out and are living independently. They know they're not really our family, but at the same time, they also understand you can still love somebody in a relational atmosphere that you can get as close as you need to be or want to be, and it doesn't have to be weird, and it's not compartmentalized, and it's not separate from your day-to-day life. Like, you got to need an oil change? Yeah, we'll come help you do your oil change. Or, you need to ask a question? We'll just run over to your apartment, or you'll come run over to our house. I think it's just weird because we don't live in a culture. We kind of do, but we kind of don't. We say we do, but we kind of don't. Like, being invited over for lunch isn't actually that normal.
Right.
It feels like it should be, but you got to be a close friend to be invited over for lunch. Not just I just met you at church or I just met you and hey, what are you doing for lunch? Like, come over.
Right.
That right there has kind of been like our kids are familiar with that.
Yeah.
So they see that difference of like, oh yeah, we can do that right now. Like we don't have to plan it and put it on the calendars and adjust our schedules and like, oh, now it's ministry time.
Right.
I now I've got to do work time or family time. It's all just kind of intermingled.
That's huge. That's huge. Can you talk about, because I'd love for people to hear the opportunity, what you guys have really been focusing on for these past 5 years or so is the kids aging out. Because there's not, once you get past a certain place, like there's not much for you. Like there are some services available, but you get past a certain point, if you're not equipped or prepared, it's sort of like, you're there.
Well, I think it started off, like I said, when we were in group care, and our first year we were there, we had an 18-year-old that we assumed, obviously, as we took over the house.
Yeah.
But she quickly, relationally, like we were in, like we were like family and like parents, and then she was like our daughter. She ended up moving back to her bio family after she graduated out of the program, and she was like a poster child of our home. Got a great plan, got a great future, got a great head on her shoulders, and loved Jesus and loved her family. All these kids love their bio families. You know, she's super excited. She understood the dysfunction and she understood what she was going back to. And she's like, I can do this, right? I can go back to this. I can be a positive influence on my own family, and which is all that was true. But then you get in it, and you need more support. She needs support, right? Because she's back in the mess. Yeah. And she needs that extra support. Well, she was in Texas at the time, was where she lived. So, we're far away. She would call us and reach back out to us when she needed. Was
this from Tennessee or from Pennsylvania?
Tennessee.
Tennessee, okay.
And so she went home. Anyway, what we were paying attention to is like the help that she needed, she couldn't get. The only way to get that was to do something major, as like be homeless, be on substance, get pregnant, go to jail. Like she had to do something major to receive services. Yeah. Like those were her options. Like either struggle and just keep, with this your will of like keep going and you got it, and which is good, and you can do that with the Lord's help. I mean, it's possible, but when it comes to services that the community would provide, only way to receive those was she had to make a huge mistake. Yeah, and it was like that's pretty tempting. Yeah, and it's like, hey, to get these resources, I need to do this. Right. So we noticed that that's just bad. Yeah. That is not what we need to be. There's a gap there. Right. So that's kind of what led us to really start praying about this and focusing on like, how do we help these kids? Because there's kids who actually want to do well and are doing well that come out of these systems and out of these programs that there's nothing for them unless they do one of those things, which actually then puts them in another spiral and a cycle of doing the wrong things just to get the help they need. So we saw the need, and we saw that it wasn't right and it wasn't available. So that's kind of what started us in kind of investigating and praying through and talking through like what it would look like or what it might be like for these kids that are actually on the right track and kind of transitioning from group care and foster care, and you're actually on the right, like stay on the right track.
Yeah. They want to do the right thing, but they need a little extra coaching and help to learn how to function like an adult with all. I mean, when you start applying to college now, it's not like the paper application you used to fill out and you got one letter of acceptance and maybe one financial aid form. There's 5 million forms. They're all digital and they're buried on unusable websites. And there are 13 people to go through on any phone call to try to get to somebody who can help. And if cognitively they're a little underdeveloped, not because they're incapable, because of background trauma and all kinds of things, there's no way they can navigate that. Sure. And they need somebody to teach them, but also walk them through it while they're doing it. And once you get past a certain place, there's no help like that available.
And they don't have the natural help like we had, parents.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're there from day one, and we could call.
That's right.
So they would call a helpline or help support, and they'd ask you a series of questions, and it'd be like, have you experienced homelessness? Well, no.
Right.
Well, okay, we can't help you. Have you experienced, are you on substance or coming off of substance? No. Right. Well, we can't help you. We only help this demographic.
Right. Yeah. And it's brutal. And so somebody to help them navigate is huge. So it teaches as well as helps them succeed in the meantime. Yeah. And it's a missing it's a gap in what's provided currently.
Yeah, and if you think about, like, a lot of our kids or young adults come from, I mean, some of them have been in foster care most of their lives, right? So every decision has been made for you. And so really to even learn, with our 15-year-old, she's taught, like, this is your choice. If you fail, this is what happens. Right? And so these kids have often been moved from home to home to home, and they don't even know how to make decisions. And so if you, like, picking up the phone to make a doctor's appointment, we would say, hey, you need to call to make a doctor's appointment. They often would have absolutely no idea how to even the first step, right? And so often we're sitting down at our kitchen table, like, okay, you're gonna call this number. Let's talk about the questions we're gonna ask. Things that often we might think this is common sense. It's not common sense because there is no one to teach the little things that we take for granted along the way with our children. This is just normal life, and they hear us. We're modeling it for them. It hasn't been modeled for these kids. Yeah. So it's everything. Like, college applications is like the mountain, right? But, like, make a doctor's appointment. Sure. Get your oil changed. Go get gas sometimes. Yeah. I mean, just things like that of, like, man, they need help often just walking through those things.
And even the interaction with them in those decisions can help uncover things they need help with that you or they don't know they need help with, whether it's FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or whether it's complications blended with that from trauma that is actually hindering cognitive ability in the moment. Not the training can't help them get there, but they don't know, and we don't know because they haven't been walked through all those administrative functions, and you don't recognize delayed administrative function until you're in the middle of administrative function. Yeah. And so to help, and the crazy thing is, a lot of those young folks can't see it cognitively because of some of those things. They can't make connection between actions and consequences, and they have to learn that. And until we're interacting with them in that, they don't even know it, and other people don't know it.
Well, I think there's also the conditions. Like, they're conditioned to do that too. Like, yes, there's the trauma, but there's also a condition that they've been in the system. Let's just say they've been in the system for a long time. Everything's done for you. You don't get to, all doctor's appointments are made for you. You don't ever get the option to make your own doctor's appointment or help with that. Mm-hmm. So there also is that condition, kind of what we're talking about. Our girls are, like, there's conditions there that they're just used to, and it's normalized, and it's so there's other conditions that are normalized on their end. Sure, like, it is not normal for me to have choice, and so it's showing them that you actually do have choice.
And what you think matters. And what matters. Your thoughts actually really matter.
Yeah, there's also an assumption a lot of times made, I think, for some of these kids, these teenagers that have had to grow up way too fast and take on responsibilities they shouldn't have, that there's just an assumption that, they just figured everything out. And it's like, no, you see this especially with, like, larger sibling groups where the older sibling has had to basically parent the younger ones, but no one's taught that one how to take care of themselves. And so we're like, well, they just took care of all these kids. They're probably fine. Like, no, they're literally, their siblings will survive and they will eat and they'll be taken care of, while the other one has probably not eaten and not thought about their future, because right now their future is making sure their siblings survive.
And our system's based on age.
Yeah.
Right? It's like an age determines if you're ready or not.
Yeah.
Not development.
Not Correct. Development. Yeah. And you don't do the development part between those times where development's important, right? It's like you just wait till the age comes, and then you said you've got what you need because you're 18.
Right. Yeah. That's right. That's huge.
Yeah. So kind of transitioning a little bit, because we've talked a little bit about that being that support for them. Having worked in the field as long as I did, I worked over a decade in the field. I know how hard it can be on families, and why most foster families are kind of that one and done, hit and run kind of thing, because they just don't have any support, or they have very little support. So tell us a bit about the support you had, how impactful it was when it was there, but also I know there's times where you're having to walk through that alone, or where there's perceived support, but there's not for, like, tangible things, but there's not maybe that support when you really need it. So kind of maybe hit on both of those areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a big question. I think we've been very supported as foster parents. So we work with older kids, but in our home we've had kids infant to, I guess, 15-year-olds. just straight from foster care with our family. And through our church, at Three Rivers, we have a care team who has been like, it's funny because the lady at the beginning, she was telling me about it, and she's a friend of mine. And I was like, I mean, she's telling me the things that they want to provide, and I'm thinking, I mean, we've been house parents, you know, we'll might use this, but I'm we probably don't really need this, you know. We got this was kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah, we didn't have this. And so I think that foster care is actually so different than group care. From our experience, because in group care, everyone's doing the same thing, and that is both of our full-time job. That's everything. That's your whole world. Foster care, you have full-time jobs, you have family, and this kid's welcoming them in, and there isn't this outside support. And so it's just very different. So we were very supported as far as, I mean, times when, you know, a baby showed up at our door, we had nothing baby because we're thinking we're going to get 8 and up. So we have bunk beds and such, and within, you know, we go pick up this baby from DFAC's parking lot, and we're thinking we have no diapers. And so within an hour, we had diapers and wipes and outfits and bassinets and, you know, everything we could need for this baby. But all the way up for really all the kids, as I'm thinking about, anything that, so practically, physically, we had things that they needed. Also, Restoration Rome, it's been a huge gift to us to be able to show up with, you know, a 2 and a 5-year-old will have no clothes for them. And so we show up the next day with the 2 and 5-year-old, and, you know, they're helping me shop. And I call Mitch to save me to take one of them for me to help me out. And so we're shopping, but here you can come in and you can get clothes and you can get toys for things. And so that's huge because a lot of people don't have that option.
Right.
So those have been super important for our family. Also, we were provided, like, you know, if we needed it. One night, and I always tell the story, is we had 5 kids at the time. And I remember my house, I mean, it looked like a war zone. I just remember sitting there and I was like, Lord, we don't got this at all. We are going to fall on our face, and I don't even know what to do next. And, you know, we had kids with some serious struggles and serious just delays and really things they needed services for. And then we had our older daughter who's back in her room sobbing her eyes out, like, I hate this. Why did we do this? And I'm thinking, our kids are going to fall. We're going to lose, like, something's going to happen. This is not good. Mark comes home and I was like, we need a date, like right now. And so they show up at our house. People show up at our house and split the kids. And some of them take 3 kids, some of them take 2 kids. And we went on a date for 2 hours with our support team. So that's huge. So, I mean, I would say if anyone can ever be a part of those care groups, it's literally life-changing. Maybe bringing a meal for you, but it's life-changing for those families when you show up and they don't have to think about a meal and you just open it up. That's one of the biggest gifts I think I've ever received, is a meal. So I don't have to think about, now I have to go cook dinner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the other side of that you were saying is the times we haven't had the supports. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Right?
Or maybe when you felt like you needed the support, but it really wasn't there, or not so much in the tangible things like the meals. I know those are huge, but there's other moments where you feel like you probably needed just other types of support, and maybe that wasn't there.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you walk into foster care, it's just not going to be pretty. And I think a lot of times, even in the church, you really want it to be pretty. I really wanted it to be pretty. And so I think there were just times, sometimes there couldn't be people to step in to take care of those things, to be honest with you. I think some of that is just the letting go of a lot of it and understanding, like, some things are going to have to fall, and that's okay because the Lord's asked me to step into this. And so I may not have the things that I would call being a good wife and being a good mom usually when things are pretty in life.
Yeah.
So those are things that I would say I want support for, but it was more of like, hey, I need to know how people are praying for us, and I need help. I need a mom to look at me and say, hey, your house is a disaster and you're a clean freak. and that is okay.
Yeah.
But I think some of the things that my children, my biological, or they're not all biological, I guess, but my ST's children, right? There are times that I've really wondered, is this right? Because I'm so afraid I'm going to lose their heart along the way. Am I able to be for them what they need me to be because I'm sacrificing for these other children? So, I mean, I would say I want support in that, but I don't really know what someone would do exactly. But there were times that people would come take out our older two and go do something fun. But often I wanted to be the one doing that, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say as far as most of what humanly can be possible, we were so supported. But I know a lot of families who, in our foster parent association, who do not have that, and they're walking it very alone. Yeah. And it's a totally different story for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna jump a couple questions because that's one on my list here too. I know you guys serve with the Foster Parent Association, Mark. I think are you still president or no? Or you have been?
No, never was president.
Okay,
but I was
made that up. Okay, co-chair. Totally lied. Sorry.
Co-president, co-chair.
Involved in a capacity of some sort of leadership with the Foster Parent Association.
And I did way more earlier than I do even now when it comes to like the leadership of it. It's mainly Jennifer Scott.
Oh, Jennifer's awesome. I've known her for a long time. So I want you to tell us a little bit about what that entails. But the main reason for that and bringing that up is, you know, we talk a lot about engaging domains at Three Rivers. You guys probably have that drilled into your heads by now. And I know that's one way you do it. You do it in your house every day and through that work and through ministry and through your family. But also, how is that different when you're doing it in a place where there's people who don't have your same beliefs about Jesus, family, parenting, marriage, foster care? Like they have just different views on that. What are some ways that you navigate that and you engage that and work through that as believers?
Yeah, I think just being a part of the community. So everybody has their own little communities inside the community, right? So like foster care happens to be ours, but it is a little community of foster parents or whatnot. So it's engaging that, right? It's like getting into it. Yeah. And being a part of it, not just to consume from it, but that you contribute to. So, and I think that when we were first fostering and we heard about the Foster Parent Association, but I went there and I was just like, man, I don't know if this is our community. Like it just didn't have very much energy. It didn't have very much life to it. And I was looking for a need, right, for myself and my family of like, I need other foster parents that not just enjoy what they do or are part of it and actively, you know, engaging that part of it, but also who understand what we're doing and what we're going through. I mean, you can talk to, like I said, my nieces and nephews and, you know, my other sides of the family who don't do this, don't quite understand what we do. Right. Still, even though we've been doing this forever and they understand what we do, but they don't, you know. So I think we need that support system that actually you can talk to and be like, and they're going to shake their heads like a big emphatic, yeah, I get that. And so I went there and I was just, I don't know what I was expecting because I've never done this before. And I showed up to the Foster Parent Association meeting and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to do for me, you know? Yeah. So, and I went a couple of times and I still was just like, I'm not feeling it. I don't even know what I'm looking for or what I'm expecting, but I'm not feeling it. And then there came an opportunity. This is kind of how I fell into that kind of that leadership role. But I just approached, I think it was Mary Margaret initially. I was just like, hey, is there anything I can do? Who do I need to talk to? Like, what do I to kind of get more involved with this and whatever? Because I was more on the relational side of things because that's where I was coming into it. Because I needed the relationship. I needed the people who understood and kind of just having that little community. I was like, how can I help do that? And then that's when they were in a transition period and I didn't know it at the time. And they're just like, oh, they're leaving and they're coming, you know, we don't know what we're going to do. Asked Jennifer to come step in. Would you want to kind of help out with kind of getting that going again and ramped up? So, I mean, like I said, basically where I was with everything else, I was like, I just wanted to like know if you needed me to like, you know, hold the money and that I distribute and like do some bookkeeping or make some emails and not like do this whole leadership piece. So I wasn't looking at that, but I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, if that's what's needed. Right. Like I said, I was coming at it from the relational standpoint. So I was like, I'm more interested in building people who enjoy being there. Like, let's make this beneficial for everybody and everybody actually is communicating and talking. It isn't just something you come get training and you go home because you do get training hours. And I feel like that's what people were doing it for versus like coming to actually meet with other foster parents. So that was kind of what my heart and my drive behind that is. And it has been and has grown and it's developed. I think we've got probably between kids and adults, we've probably running around 60 every meeting, every month.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Which is good. And I feel like people are enjoying being there and coming there and they're getting to know other families. We've gotten to have other families in our home and like just watch their kids and, kind of do that where it's like when we first got here, we're like, we need some respite and we don't even know who to call. We called DFACS and they didn't have any respite. So we're like, I know we can't just leave them with Joe Schmo. It's like, how do we do this? So we didn't know who to call. And now we have those people of like, I'm going to give them a call and see if they're available. Why? Because they're my friends. Yeah. Like we know them. Like they know our kids know them.
Are the people who come to the Foster Parent Association respite as well as active foster parents?
Yes. So everybody, anybody that can come that's even remotely involved in fostering or caring for children that aren't their own. Yeah. So there's kinship, there's fictive
grandparents.
I got you.
There's respite and there's foster.
How many current do you know how many? Because I used to be on DFACS board for 15 years, and now that I'm not, I don't get monthly statistics. So I'm woefully behind in data. Do you know how many foster parents we currently have in Floyd County
for DFACS?
For DFACS, yeah.
I don't know. The last time I looked, and I think this number is even lower. It was 14.
Okay.
And zero respite.
Zero respite. Yeah. That sounds about. I mean, that's kind of about what I was expecting.
They're like emergency. Yeah, she does something.
Just some emergency stuff. Yeah.
There's zero like who actually signed up for respite. Yeah. Just like.
Yeah. Well, we had a couple, and now they fluctuate too.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. That's Floyd County's been our challenge forever, and all the reasons behind that is because it's hard, and. I don't want to get down the rabbit hole, but there's a lot of reasons why it's hard to be a foster parent. Not just the kids, but just getting in, staying in, red tape. There are lots of problems, but you guys deal with that, right? So you're dealing with some of those challenges.
One of the things, and I quit saying this. I used to say this, and I'm going to share this on here, but I hope you hear my heart on that, whoever's listening. But we used to say foster care isn't for everybody. I quit saying that because I think it is for every believer. If I'm going to say every Christian, I think it is for everybody. I'm not saying what capacity, but I'm quit saying that everybody shouldn't be a foster parent because I'm like, I actually don't believe that. I think everybody should be a foster parent, and I just don't know if that's what God's calling you to do at this time, because it's
everybody's got a role.
Everybody's got a role.
If we got to make sense of what our book says, and I understand that's costly and hard, and I get the temptation to say we're in the same boat of like, I shouldn't say that because I hear people say, no, that's not me. But I'm like, but we got to make sense of the book somehow, right? It says this is ours, and we have to represent that.
I feel like when I said that, I was giving them an excuse to say no.
Correct. Yeah. Same way.
In a way, it's similar to the, not everyone's called to be a missionary. I'm like, well, we are.
We kind of are, right?
It may look different. It doesn't mean everyone's called to go to a remote place across the world, but everyone's called to be a part of that.
See, I think we're battling Christian subculture and those things as opposed to actually the battle. The battle is caring for the kids, and we're battling subculture that has created a language around opting out as opposed to a mandate to be in. And so we're swimming up the Ocoee as opposed to flowing with the Ocoee. And so it's battling that. We know what is right, but we're battling this concept inside our tribe that says something different. And so if we hack these people off, then we're going to lose them anyway. Well, they're not there anyway. So we're like, which one do I do? Yeah. Right. And hear me. And I am not in any way selling ease. This is horrible. Our story is one of that's mostly failure. It's not success. And it's suffering. So don't hear me say, oh, roses, chocolates, win, love, and cuddles. No, it's fighting. It's horror. It's misery. It's difficult. But at the same time, that's not an excuse to not do my part. Does that make sense? And so I've tracked with you on that. And when people hear this, I'd probably, they're already not here, so we're not going to run them off. But at least it's being honest about knowing what you're getting into.
Well, I think that was what Lauren was saying, like how, where I was when I was wrestling with this in my heart is like I was waiting for the convenient time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Right.
so there never was a convenient time.
No.
Like, and I'm like, and I'm like, I mean, if I had to say when that convenient time would be, it would be when everything's perfect.
Yeah.
So there's no convenient time. And I'm like, so what am I doing? What's my reason?
Right.
And I have reasons and I have justifications and I could have given you them and they would have made sense and people would have shook their head and been like, yep, that makes sense. Like, hey, we just started a whole new program that we're developing from scratch.
Yeah.
Like, that's plenty. Like, hey, we have adoptive and foster kids, literally. Like, we're dealing with that age group. I mean, all that stuff. It was good stuff. And I'm like,
these are good excuses.
Yeah.
And they're good excuses to me.
Right.
Sure. Like, and I'm like, hey, we just moved here. Give us some time. I mean, like, I can throw them out there. But then it came down to kind of like that of like, I know we're supposed to be doing it because I can read the word and just know that. I mean, I can't read the word and be like, I'm not sure. Like, no, I'm sure. Yeah. Now it's a matter of, and I know there's different capacities because we do it in different capacities, but at the same time, I'm like, but the hardest part is this, right? Obviously, accepting kids into your home and disrupting everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I get that. That's hard. But at the same time, I'm like, we say this as believers, that's what we want. We know that about the Lord, and we know that's the way he operates, and that's what we want, yet we're waiting for all the stars to align.
Yeah.
And I can't
promise that.
I can't promise. I don't. And to be honest with you, I don't really want that. I don't really expect that because I know that's not real.
Yeah.
Or not how it works.
Right.
And that's not the economy of the Lord.
Yeah.
I get that, but at the same time, I'm like, but I want it to be that. I don't. And it's just this weird kind of what you're saying. It's like I don't want to discourage people, and I want to encourage people to do it, but not because it makes sense.
Right.
Because if I try to do that, I'm just going to throw myself into a loop, and I'm going to be like, what?
Well, it's getting in eyes wide open as opposed to there's something about your expectations being set appropriately that helps you navigate and persevere as opposed to unrealistic expectations, which is why you'll quit. And so it's that eyes wide open, man. It's like if you recognize you're walking into toxicity and dysfunction and you equip differently. It's like on D-Day, if they thought they were walking onto Omaha Beach expecting slushies from the German soldiers, they wouldn't have prepared very well. But they understood they were going to get shot. There's going to be a kill rate. And they needed a certain percentage to make it to a certain point. If they could make those numbers, they had a shot. So it wasn't a surprise when the first guy out the door got shot. They knew that, expected that. And it's sort of when you jump into this, there's this expectation that this is going to be hard. And so when it gets hard, you're like, okay, I'm not going to quit. I don't have any option now. I'm in. I got to go to the end. And so you want that honesty there. And it's not trying to dissuade. It's just trying to prepare to be successful. And success doesn't necessarily mean that story successful. It means you obeyed the Lord.
And success is just defined differently. Even talking about war or whatever, success wasn't not getting shot.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though nobody wanted to get shot.
Right.
But success was getting there, showing up, storming the beach, and having a plan and executing it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think with foster care, and I know it is war in one sense, but at the same time, it's like, success isn't pretty. Success is bloody. Yeah. Success may be dying, and maybe dying to your dreams that you thought you had, but at the same time, there's that reality of if you don't understand why you're sacrificing these things, like if you don't understand the underarching cause or the reason behind it, then and I think we miss that as believers because we don't really understand what we're saying no to, to be able to say yes to the cause, even. That makes sense if I'm saying that correctly.
No, it's good.
Well, I got a couple questions I want to kind of really more specific to your experience with Charlie. I know it's been kind of more recent, so not like diving deep into it, but kind of, so one kind of that's on the hardship of things and one side that's on a little bit more on the joyful side of things. Okay. So the first one is, one of the hardest parts of this journey for a lot of people is balancing this weight of uncertainty and trying to be patient, but while also doing your best to advocate for the child that's in your care, for your home, for your family's well-being in that waiting. So just I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about that aspect of kind of battling that, because again, you weren't even expecting a baby to begin with. You got a 2-day old, is that correct?
That's
like
right.
just
Yeah.
2-day old infants, about as helpless as you can be in that moment. Didn't know if you'd have her for days, hours, weeks, much less end up making her a part of your family. But the road has been up and down, sideways, in and out, hopeful, lack of hope, all those things. I know because we've kind of walked through a lot of that, at least in a place to understand that. So just tell us a little bit about that experience and how you guys were able to kind of survive and navigate that.
Yeah, I think that is one of the probably most challenging things we've ever done. When we said yes to a baby, we thought we were saying yes for like a week, and our kids can play with a baby, and this will be so fun. And I was a little, and we were brand new to foster care, so we were 6 days in, had just been approved. And so I think we had to learn a lot through her about just foster care in general. And so, yes, her case was very up and down for 2.5 years of. Because in the beginning, the goal is if you can help a family be reunited, that's the goal, right? If it can be healthy, if you can figure out how to work with parents, and that's the goal. And so that's kind of was our MO from the beginning. We quickly found out that was not a good situation for that to happen. And so then it became just, hey, let's help her. Well, in the beginning, we were thinking it would happen, be reunited at least with someone else. And so we started preparing as best we could because she came and they let us know that, hey, there's very likely that she could be having drug withdrawals within the first few days. And so we said, well, how will we know that? And they said, well, she sleeps a lot and if she cries a lot. And I was like, well, you just described every baby on the face of the planet. So,
Right.
okay. Right. So, we did not expect to get a baby because we're old. And so we stared at that sweet baby for every single night. We would just take turns sleeping for 24 hours, each time of like, hey, you sleep 4 hours, I sleep 4 hours, you sleep 4 hours, because we would stare at her because we had no idea if she was okay or not. And so there were things like that your entire living changes. You don't have time to take a really good nap before you go pick up the baby, or things like that. And so it changes immediately. So there was a lot of that, but I think as we started to see the progression of, hey, we're going to need to fight for this baby to adopt her, when it came to that point. And then there were these highs and lows of what the judge would say each time, each visitation. Mitch would get us coming by the door, and sometimes we would say, hey, Mitch, and sometimes I'd bawl my eyes out, because there's just emotions that come with it of, even as believers, like our job is we're praying for these biological parents, we're praying for these children, and it's so split because none of it's supposed to be, none of it's the way the Lord intended it. And so none of it feels right. There's not a moment that I think I could settle on, oh, this feels really right, fully, right? And so it's constantly fighting against what your heart says inside of like, I don't know what's okay. I want to fight, but there's just all these different things. And then you think some things are super common sense that we're all going to think this is helpful. This is safety for the baby. And then you walk before a judge and they say, this is going to happen. And you're like, what in the world is happening with law? And so then there's just that fierceness of coming up, protecting this baby. Right. And so I would say we went through about every single emotion, from sadness to anger to fear to joy and happiness and excitement. I think one of the biggest, I would tell you it was one of the hardest, but one of the biggest gifts for our family. And I would even say that in the middle of it, because we constantly, the four of us, had to look at each other. Most of the time, life was great, by the way. Let's just like normal day to day. But there were just times when I start thinking about she may be placed back in a situation that is literally incredibly dangerous, practically. And I can do nothing.
Zero control over that.
Nothing can I do to protect my baby. And I had to go there a lot of, Lord, like, there were times I would just be crying, and it was always my now middle daughter would walk in and she would start crying. She's like, you're thinking about Charlie. I'm like, yes, I'm good. But we'd have to ask each other, and the four of us would actually ask each other, like, do we believe the Lord is good whatever happens? Because the Lord is not good because we end up keeping Charlie. The Lord is good, and somehow this is good whatever happens. Like, he is still good. but we kind of had to keep each other accountable in that, and really ask ourselves. And we would ask ourselves, like, where is your heart on that? And there were moments that I was like, Lord, there's nothing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just that trust, and I've never had to trust the Lord in that way. Of trusting, like, your goodness is way bigger than how this ends up. Even though in the world, like, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but right. So I think navigating our daughter's hearts was huge and hard in that, because they're young and they're teenagers and they're confused and about a lot of these things. We set up some practical things. Our middle daughter now wanted to share a room with Charlie, and that was her. And so we were like, hey, not unless the Lord allows us to adopt her, right? Because we're thinking if she's pulled, like, it's already going to be enough of things. But we had set some things up of, like, you know, if the Lord takes her, what are some practical things that looks like for taking care of our family's hearts? Because we knew going in it was going to be hard. We didn't know it was going to be that hard. But then the Lord ended up, like, he did crazy miracles. And she's ours. And really, we had to do absolutely nothing. He literally did every single thing along the way. It wasn't any awesome thing we said or did with a great lawyer. The Lord literally changed the birth mother's mind and heart, and she signed the papers on her own.
Yeah, that's so cool. Not all the hard shit, but just it's like the disciples on the boat and during the storm. It's like, he's here, and we believe these things, but like, I'm still getting soaked and almost knocked off the boat, and it's like it's natural for me to have these fears, but Jesus is like, no. Do you understand who I am? Yeah. And I've got this, and I can control this. And I think that's hard for anyone to understand who hasn't walked through that, just the weightiness of that. Yeah. So fast forward through some of that. I guess it'd be a little bit of a rewind now. About a month and a half ago now, I've had the privilege of sitting in on dozens and dozens of adoptions, and they never get old. It's one of my favorite things to do. But I've never seen a crowd quite as big as there was at Charlie's adoption day. And I think a lot of that's because of how many people love you too, and love your family and love Charlie, and and I think a lot of it has to do with how many people have been a part of that. But just even then there was a big contingent of church people who made it, not just families, for what's basically a 10-minute formality of, it's the craziest thing. You go through all this stuff for years, and the judge is literally like, all right, attorney, these people want to adopt, right? And they're like, yep. And they're okay. They can care for this child. Yep. All right, cool. And they sign it. Like it feels like, wait, that was it. So all that said, just how did that feel for you guys, especially knowing how hard and long the road was to get to that point? I mean, I could probably guess, but just for our listeners, having gone through all that to get to that day, I mean, that had to be something special.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was way more exciting and way more, of a relief, of weight, I think, being lifted that I don't even think I realized was there in some ways towards the end, because we were pretty sure towards the end that was going to happen, right? But I think the constant not knowing that someone else could come along, and another potential birth father could come along, and another, so I mean, it was awesome, and I was just so thankful the Lord chose to do it that way. And I mean, it was really fun having so many people, because forever, we had 50 people there, right? And so forever, our daughter gets to see, like, this is a part of your story. And because of what the Lord does, like, so many people celebrate that. It's not just what happened to you, but the Lord has used that little girl and so many people. I mean, really, even in Foster Parent Association, I mean, just so many people in our community of Charlie. Someone walks up to us at a Mexican restaurant, and they know her. They know her story, because I think the Lord's done a lot in her little life. And so I think I guess that day was more of like, it was so exciting, but I think it was just super humbling and a very big privilege that we got to be standing in the place where we got to be standing that day.
Yeah. And as someone, and both of us thankfully got to be there, like, it felt like a relief to all of us too. Like, it was just weird. Like, it was almost like a relief, not for Charlie, but for y'all. Just being like, okay, because you're right. I mean, up until that judge puts pen on paper and signs that order, nothing's guaranteed. They could change the date. They could, somebody come up and be like, I'm Charlie's dad, right. Like, and they have to pursue that. Like, anybody, like, I could have walked in there and said, hey, I'm pretty sure that's my daughter. And they would have to at least pursue that. And
which has happened all along the way.
Right. Long story short, this has definitely happened. So, that again paints a picture of, I wanted to ask both those questions, because like you said, there's there's stories of what we would call failure. There's stories of success. There's lots of difficulty. They don't always end like that. I've worked many cases where kids went back to that scenario. You're like, I don't know if these kids are going to live, and I've told judges that, like under oath, like I think you're making a mistake. Like when they you ask my opinion, this is what it is. I'm like, these children are safe here, and they're not safe here, and we have 3 or 4 years of history to show that. So if you make that decision, and then they make that decision, and it's hard to do that. Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, I think with the big crowd at the courthouse that day when we were adopting her is a testament and a testimony to almost the contrast and the contradiction of what the system says it's about. Right. It's like, you want what's best for these kids. That's the reason, right? The reason is we want what's best for the child. Take a look around. This is what we ask about for every kid that's in, or a kid, period, that's born, right? That you have a community of support, and you have these people who who will take their day off, even though it's a 10-minute procession, to come to the courthouse for a little girl who has that. Like, that's weird, right? But that's what we all say we want for these kids. Yet, when you have that, like a birth father can come in and say, I'm the birth father after 3 years, and come wipe all that away, right? And I think there's a contradiction, right? Of like what we really say we want for these kids and what was actually happening in that moment. And we're so willing to kind of wipe that out because of the legal implications or the, or even just the familial implications. And I'm once again, I'm not pushing, not about, I'm not anti-reunification. I'm pro-reunification. That's foster care. That is foster care. Yeah. So
the goal
is that, but it's only in the context of health,
right?
And what's best for the child,
right?
Yeah. So, and I think that's so easily misconstrued. And I think being there and showing that and having a representation of like, look what Charlie has, and it ain't just about these two people or our little, four-person family, now 5, but like it's 50 people.
Yeah.
In this one city. I mean, not even everybody is there. It's just this one city that has an impact and an invested interest in this little girl.
It's huge.
100%.
Yeah.
I know we're getting up on that time, but I got 2 more questions before we get to Hayes takeaways. So bear with me. We're going to go a little long, people who are listening, but hopefully you're getting a lot out of it. This is not going to be the easiest question to answer. That's kind of convoluted. I'm going to ask you just to do your best, but I think it's important for the theme of our podcast and what we talk about is, how have you guys seen the gospel at work through your experience in foster care and adoption, and how have you seen that affect others?
Yeah, well, and I've thought about this, so maybe I don't have a complete answer, but depends on what you mean by the gospel or how you define the gospel too. Of like, I think it is the narrative, right, and the story of what God has done for us, and and I think adoption is an incredible picture of that. When it comes to like, it's out of our control. We don't deserve it. It's somebody that comes in out of the blue, in a sense, to kind of help and for healing and restoration. And it's one of those things where just adoption itself, especially under the name of Yahweh or God and of Jesus, like, and how that can look. Now, you can do that outside of the name of Jesus and Yahweh too, and it can look similar, but I think it's more artificial. So I think that understanding that the picture of the gospel itself is adoption is a picture of the gospel itself. So there's that. And then also the aspect of it's a way that the gospel is manifested in our world, in our culture. And it's not kind of what we've all kind of talked about right now. It's not easy, and it's not fun, and it's hard, and it's messy, and it's ugly, and it's gross in a lot of ways. And there's feelings that come along with that you don't want any part of. And we live in a society that says whatever you can do to mitigate or get away from those feelings, do that. This is the opposite.
Yeah.
You're running towards those feelings. And I think that there's, in Scripture, you see that because it forces you, kind of what Lauren was saying, it forces you to depend. It forces you to trust the Lord and it forces you to believe what you say you believe. Forces you. Like there's no way around it, or you can just run from it again. So I think that there's this element of maybe not just what the gospel is, but also is like, how does that gospel apply?
Yeah, it's good. Good word. And then finally, for anyone listening who's been praying or thinking about whether to foster or adopt, just simply what's your message to those people? Don't do it.
Do it. No, do. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I think Mark's right. There's not a perfect time. There's never a perfect time. I would have told you that was the least perfect time we could have ever done it. But also the things that we talk about that are so hard. I think as a mom, like a lot of people talk about their children in their home, right? Like that. And what about my kids? And I get it. And I would say, I used to pray when I was a house mom, Lord, please bless my children despite what we do as house parents. Because there was a lot, right? They're sharing with a lot of kids and lots of trauma. And then I realized the more I watched the Lord work, I was like, Lord, please bless my children because of what we do. And I would tell you, with all the hard, we've had 8 kids in our home. Again, 0 to 15, some short term, some longer term. But I think that my biggest fears, which there were a lot, my biggest fears, the Lord has shown us the way through those fears and blown my mind at the other end. And you were saying, like, these aren't pretty stories. Some things are pretty in foster care. Some things are not. We got to adopt Charlie. That's really pretty, and I'm so thankful that that's the way it turned out. But there are just days, there are fears, there are things that you're not going to want to do. And so if there's some understanding, like Mitch said, you said this well, like understand what you're walking into as far as keep your eyes wide open. Be wise when you walk in. Be careful, but understand the Lord can take care of our heart. And that was my thing. It's like, Lord, what I can trust is that because I've seen you do it before so many times, is you will take care of our hearts and you will meet us on the other side of whatever this is, whether Charlie ends up with us or not. And so if you're a believer, that's the promise we have. We don't have the promise, but it's going to end up great. We don't. There are also practical things you do with your children. Like when we have older kids, our girls, we move them to the same room and they lock their door and they have a walkie-talkie. And then we give a kid, not that the kid doesn't know that, 15-year-olds don't know that, but then we have a walkie-talkie in our room and Charlie comes to our room. So there's safety, there's wisdom. So be wise, be vigilant, like pay attention to what's going on in your home. Right. But there are ways, and it honestly, it has blown my mind to see what the Lord has done in our hearts, in our children's hearts. So I would say absolutely pursue it, but pursue it with eyes wide open and with wisdom. And Lord willing, pursue it with a community around you.
Yeah.
I know we're running late, but I want to say this one more thing is, yes, I think everybody should do it. I think every believer should definitely do it. But at the same time, I'm also saying not because it puts our money where our mouth is. I think this is the heart and what God cares about. And I think that, and I had this awesome thought, and now I'm losing it. But at the same time, I'm like,
of age, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's just one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how we can not do it and then feel satisfied. And I think, and I had to get there. So I'm not, trust me. I mean, I was 40, I don't even know how old we were, 45, 44. When I decided this, like when I thought this way. So it's not even, it's something that definitely, but I also think that it's so easy. Like I said, we have excuses and we have justifications to do the opposite that, we have to come to grips with. So I think it's, yes, do I think everybody should do it? And why should they do it? Because it's to the heart of God. But you also have to be, like you said, be vigilant, be prepared, but understand you could get shot in the head, right? So, I mean, it's just one of those things. Should that mean you shouldn't do it because you should get shot in the head? You shouldn't go defend your country, right?
Right.
No, you could and you might, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's
good.
Good work.
Chris, Hayes takeaways.
Let's do some Hayes takeaways. I got 3 quick ones today. Number one, there's a lot of things that are hard that are worth doing. If you feel the Lord pushing you into foster care and or adoption, be obedient and know that where he leads you, he will be there to walk you through it all. Number two, if you're a TRC member and want to get more involved, our FAM ministry, which stands for Family Advocacy Ministry, could use your help supporting and assisting families who are fostering. You can send an email to FAM, that's FAM at threeriversc.org. And our ministry directors, Andrew and Jessica Smith, will be happy to connect you and get you started serving in that ministry. And then finally, if you know someone who is or has fostered or adopted, they need help, right? They always need some help. So jump in, serve in some way, somehow, pray for them, encourage them. Do not leave them alone. Satan hates this work. He hates seeing families restored, children being moved from unsafe situations to safe ones. He hates seeing Christian families taking in kids and raising them to know and love Jesus. And that's why it's hard. But that's also why it's vital for the kingdom.
Good stuff. Mark, Lauren, thank y'all for taking time to come in today. I know it's work, childcare, dragging kids around, and there's a hurricane coming up through our way. You guys probably heard some of the rain through the sound because it's raining that hard. Thank y'all for your time. Yeah. Appreciate what you guys do. Thank you for doing it well. Guys, thank you for listening to Theology Dirt or watching. And now we're even on like TikTok or something. Chris has like figured that stuff out. That's really weird. But we're there. And so thank you for YouTube. Thanks for Spotify. And thanks for TikTok. You guys looking and participating. Share the podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. Leave a comment. All that makes it go further. But more importantly, this is for Three Rivers people, for you to get involved in conversation, to help us take our theology and actually put it into practice on things that we can't talk about on Sunday mornings. But it extends our reach into our lives on a daily basis to help us get deeper and walk out some hard things. So thanks for listening. Thanks for participating. Y'all have a great day. See you next time. Out.
Great is your glory. You go before